Today is November 22nd of 2020. We want to welcome you to We Will Not Suffer in Silence in conjunction with American Descendants of Slavery Lineage Therapy. I am Shomari M. Harris, licensed clinical social worker here in New York City, and I will allow my colleague to introduce herself. Sharona?
My name is Sharona Johnson, and I am also a licensed clinical social worker here in New York City as well.
And today, the topic on the floor is how to deal. Oh, matter of fact, we got to take care of the business first. First of all, you cannot do anything for American Descendants of Slavery, hashtag ADOS, without mentioning the parents of the movement, the leaders of the movement. That's Yvette Carnell at Breaking Brown on YouTube and Antonio Moore, Tone Talks, because without them, they have been the impetus for all of this. You know, without them, this conversation about reparations and ADOS would not be in the forefront and would not be as prominent as it is. And so we want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due and, you know, give people their flowers while they are here and they can smell them, because you all have lit a fire under so many of us who identify as ADOS and American Descendants of Slavery. And so we want to make sure that you know that we respect and revere the work that you all have. We want to just acknowledge them and give you your props. So with that being said, let's get into it. Today, we are going to talk about how to deal with your family during the holidays. Sharona, the holiday Thanksgiving is coming up.
Yes, Thanksgiving is coming up, and so is Christmas, New Year's, and any other holidays that you may congregate with your family. And we all know that as much as we love our family, sometimes, you know, when we get around them, there could be some tough conversations that can be had. And so we want to talk to you all about like how to deal with that and cope with being amongst our family members and having tough conversations.
Exactly right. So what we are going to do is Sharona and I have come up with 10 things that you can do to help you to deal and to cope with having difficult conversations or just dealing with family during the holidays. And we're going to go through those. And as we do so, feel free to comment in the chat if you have any questions or you have any comments. So we'll be reading those and responding to you all. So with that being said, shout out to Kelly. We see you, Kelly. Kelly was also joined us a couple of weeks ago for our first session, which also went very, very well. So also keep in mind, we're going to be doing these either a live stream or a Zoom session every 2 weeks, so bi-weekly. So look out for the next one in 2 weeks. All right, so Sharona, we ready to get into this top 10 ways to deal with family during the holidays?
Yes, I am, Shamari. I am ready to get started on this conversation that is so relevant to my life and the lives of many of us. You know, when we come around family to talk and have discussions, and people are saying things that we don't necessarily agree with, like how do we handle the people that we love while also managing our emotional regulations?
Yeah. And it's not just difficult conversations and topics that may be contentious, but just the fact that, you know, we as ADOS and American Descendants of Slavery, we have a lot of trauma in our family and in our individual lives. And so, you know, you got physical trauma, emotional trauma, multi-generational trauma, sexual trauma, and a lot of times this trauma is inflicted on us by family members. And so you might find yourself at the dinner table for Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's with people who have traumatized you or in some other way been abusive towards you. And it's not always the right time to bring those things up, but you got to manage that stuff. So let's get into this. All right. Number one, we want to meet people where they are. Now, I know that sounds pretty self-explanatory, but it is real. You got to meet people where they are. So particularly for us as American descendants of slavery, we had if you are watching this and you already identify as American descendant of slavery, hashtag ADOS, it's probably because you have educated yourself and been watching Breaking Brown, and you've been watching Tone Talks, and you've been reading all the books and reading all the articles, and you have the data, because we know the ADOS is a data-driven movement. And so sometimes you come in contact with people that don't necessarily have as much information as you do. Mm-hmm. Right, Sharona?
Right. A lot of us come from various levels of education and information. And so like it can be tough, dealing with people who don't have the same knowledge that you may have. And so it's like we have to meet them where they are and understand that people may not be as informed as us. And sometimes, they are okay with it. And sometimes they don't want to be no more informed than where they are. And sometimes people are just stuck with where they are as well.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned that, because, a lot of times we don't think about ignorance being a survival strategy, right? Sometimes people are okay with not knowing what they don't know. Because not knowing what they don't know allows them to continue doing what they have always done.
Yeah.
And for us as people who may be armed with a little bit more information than some of our family and friends, knowing that can help build your capacity for empathy, because empathy is what allows us to create more compassion in our hearts and more space in our hearts for people who are not quite there yet. Yeah. All right.
I definitely agree with you on that. And practicing empathy and learning to have empathy, especially with people that, are your family and have various levels of education and who don't want to know what you know and are so resistant to the information that you're trying to relay to them, or may even show resistance to you for you knowing what you know as well. It could definitely be a tough thing.
Yeah.
But it's important for us to have that understanding that, a lot of our family members, they have been conditioned as well. Slavery, post-traumatic slave syndrome, all of that has played a role on many of different generations within the American descendants of slavery lineage. The elders, a lot of them, they weren't able to complete their education because they had to survive. They had to work. And then the conditioning of what the white supremacy has done to a lot of people, they took a lot of that conditioning on as a means of survival as well. And then later on, some generations, they did have a little bit more opportunities of education as well. And they pursued what they could, and then, or they had to go to work as well. And then you come down toward our generations where we are a bit more educated as far as academically than our elders, and we are pursuing and learning a lot more about us, ourselves, our history, and we're a bit more liberal also in our thinking as well. So it's just trying to have the understanding that, we have an opportunity that many of our ancestors, our elders didn't have. And we just got to have that empathy and have the understanding, I know what I know, and because of these A, B, C, Y, Z. And it can be tough trying to, have that understanding, because whenever you have knowledge, you want to share it with people, right?
Yeah.
And you want them to know what you know. You feel like because we have this knowledge and we lay out generations, we are to bring this back to our people and educate them with what we know, what they didn't have the opportunity to know. But sometimes we are met with resistance and, barriers and arguments, and it could definitely be tough. And then a lot of people, they don't want to accept the truth of things because, as you said, ignorance is bliss. I remember when I first learned about that statement and what it meant, and I understand that it's true for many people. It's just can be tough for people to accept the truth of things, and then we're all the other things later, a little bit later in our conversation. But there's a lot of things that are playing into the role why our elders and some of our family members are the way that they are.
Yeah. Sean, as you were speaking about the lack of access to education that was, excuse me, denied to some of the previous generations and some of our ancestors, the word that comes to mind for me is appreciation. Because in thinking about it in that way, we can be and should be very appreciative of the sacrifices that the elders have made in order for us to have the gains that we now enjoy today.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we have as much access to education and information and knowledge as we have today is because of the sacrifices that they made. And so again, in knowing that, then hopefully that will build more empathy in our hearts for some of these difficult conversations and some of these contradictory opinions that we hold as opposed to some of the opinions that they hold. And then the other thing, when you were talking about how when we get this information and we gain this knowledge, we want to go and share it with everybody. I could not help but think about The Color Purple when Nettie was teaching Celie how to read, and she was so excited about teaching her how to read. And it's one of the things that, I feel like happens with ADOS is that we find out, we come to understand that there's language for this and there's data that supports how we've been feeling in our hearts and in our minds. And so it's not just us and we're not alone. And so we are eager to spread that information. But unlike Celie, sometimes our family members are not so receptive to that information, or they just still disagree because they haven't quite sat with it long enough yet. So that's what I was thinking about as you were talking. But let's get into thing number 2 that we can do. Well, this is more of a reminder that, we as ADOS people, we tend to be a little more conservative in our views than what we realize. And the older generations, they tend to be a little bit more conservative in comparison to the younger generation, thinking like Gen X, millennials, and now Gen Z, which it makes sense because, if you look at throughout history, if you are a part of a specific generation, then you hold certain views. And as we mature and as we get older, we become entrenched in those views. But it's always been human nature for the younger to buck up against what has come before them. And this will also tie into some things that we're going to talk about later about who to actually try and give this information to and to actually speak to about this. But part of the reason why, some of the members of the older generation tend to be more entrenched is one of these things is it's kind of, it's omnipresent in our lives. And it's this C word called Christianity, Sharon, I see your face. Look, we know that it's there. We know that it's there. And I'm not telling anybody they can't have their Jesus. But what I am saying to you is that, a lot of the Christian values and Christian beliefs tend to be very conservative that is contrary to some of the more progressive social views and political views that some of us hold as Gen Xers and millennials. So I'm not telling you to go and fight with grandma about her Christianity, but I am saying that understand it because she is, and she believes in Jesus Christ and she holds those values dear and she's in church every Sunday, that it may be a little more difficult to have some of these conversations with her because you don't necessarily hold the same views that she does.
Yes, I definitely agree with you on that. Like the influence of Christianity has definitely led many American descendants of slavery to have a little bit more conservative views and values, and a lot of them don't even get that. They don't even understand that a lot of their ways of thinking is similar to how or white people think as well, and a lot of the conservatives, of course, comes from the white conditioning too that a lot of our elders or our parents' generations have come about and also instill in some of us, the later generations. But I see that many of us have definitely broken away from a lot of that conservative views as well, which has led to our thinking to be a bit different, which of course lends to, a bit of sometimes uncomfortness around family members because like our, our thought process, how we think about things, how we view things, our perspectives can be a little bit different as well. Like it's really interesting to see how the generations are just different now. Like as we continue to go on and on, but yeah, the younger people, the younger generations, we are definitely less conservative. Like we still hold on to a lot of the values that our elders have instilled in us, but we've just like, I guess you could say we kind of remix some of it. To be
and are more willing to question them.
Yes, to be a bit more progressive and a bit more liberal as well. There's a lot of people who are conservatives in democratic clothing, bodies. I say this often that a lot of people, there's a lot of our family members that, they believe in the pull yourself up by the bootstraps. They have that same type of thinking. They believe if they made it out, then this other person can make it out too. A lot of people don't really systemic racism, like they don't understand how like racism is embodied in like our systems and our workplace. They don't really understand how a lot of these things are still preventing us from being able to move forward in our lives. And it's just like, wow, you think like this? It's the same thing that this Trump supporter was saying. Like, it could be a bit frustrating,
Some study where they were people who identify as Black American descendants of slavery, but when they lined up their belief policy for policy with conservatives, a lot of them were aligned with one another. And it was surprising to people because they were thinking that just because, they were Black or because they were ADOS, that their thinking was so contrary to, somebody who might identify as a white conservative. But the underarching theme there is Christianity. And Christianity has influenced a lot of how we think about things in America. And so it would make sense that for ADOS or, for, the average white guy living in Ohio, that a lot of the values would overlap because a lot of their religious principles are the same.
Yeah. Chrissy in the chat makes a good point. Religion has been used as a weapon for bondage. Religion definitely gets used as a weapon often. I think it's been used as a weapon since forever, and especially particularly in this country. I can't speak for too much about anywhere else because this is the country is what I really know about, and it's used as a weapon. I feel like we've also tried to use it as a weapon of defense. That has also influenced American descendants of slavery to also have this conservative thought for us to sometimes, like you said, for survival purposes, we tend to sometimes try to assimilate to ways of thinking or to certain cultures in order to survive, to not deal with so much scrutiny, to be accepted, to not have to just live,
Yep, that's exactly right. Shall we get into point number 3, tip number 3, which is have patience for people who don't know what you know yet, right? And in having patience, we want you to think about the ways that you engage your family and your friends who don't know what you know yet. And one of the ways that you can do that is you can offer up explanations, you can offer up information, you can offer up support, but do so with kindness and not what we call moral superiority, because that's one of the things that we often hear. You went off to college and now you came back and you think you know more than us, or just because you got all those degrees and whatnot, you think you know everything. It's not the case. We do not ever want to talk down to people or be condescending, but sometimes you may have access to things that some other people don't have access to, and
Yeah.
and your zealousness to try and share that information, it may be misinterpreted or misconstrued. So we're just going to ask you to offer these books and these films and these articles, but do so with kindness and recognize that your family and friends may not necessarily, because they may not be where you are right now. Sometimes it's them to understand the the purpose behind what you're doing, and that it really is out of love and not out of a place of condescension.
Yes, and it also kind of goes back to our earlier points and having an understanding of why they are where they are at. And I don't mean in the sentence with the word "at," but
like behind that. Look, it's all right. We all family on this line. We can talk how we talk. Okay.
Yeah. But like having patience, like Shamar was saying, be kind. I will also too recommend as well as just like taking deep breaths, because sometimes I know it can be hard to have patience with people who don't know what you know, and that there are some people. Also remember too, this is not one of our points, but this is a thought that just came up. Also remember too that there are some people who don't want to understand you at all. They don't want to, like, it's hard whenever you argue with people who don't want to understand what you're saying. You're basically arguing with the wall. And whenever you meet people, like encounter people like that or family members like that, you should definitely try to have patience and just understand they're not trying to hear me. They're not trying to understand what I'm trying to say. So, just offer your evidence, your books, your films, your articles, whatever information that you may have, and just go on, because part of having patience is not stressing yourself out too. Whenever we encounter people who don't know what we want, don't know what we know, and don't want to know what you know, or don't want to understand, it can be so frustrating, right? Your blood level is rising, and you're just angry, you're frustrated. And these pointers tonight that we're trying to relay to y'all is to help you out, to help you be calm and emotionally regulated and not ready to lose a close cousin or your favorite relationship, because a lot of arguments happen at the dinner table.
Yeah,
a lot of things go down during the holidays.
Now, wait a minute, Sharon, let me make sure I got this straight. So, is what you're telling the people to, in a nutshell, know when to say when, or as my daddy always said when I was growing up, know when to and when not to. Know when to let something go.
Yes, basically, yeah. And it's something that is hard to do. It is, because like when you know something and you feel it and you really want to share it with someone, you want them to get it. It's like you want them to understand, but it's like when they don't want to, or if they're not there yet, you gotta take a step back. You gotta take your deep breath, and you gotta be patient and just deliver it to them with loveness, kindness, and just peace. How we deliver information to people also determines on how they're going to be receptive of it as well. And just know that too, that all of us family members, all of us American descendants of slavery, we're all still going through the same struggles and the same fights.
Yeah, that's similar to what Shantae is saying here in the chat. Good to remember your family is also going through the same or a similar type of post-traumatic slave syndrome as well. And then we got Pat Roberts saying, in the real world, ADOS is a calling. That is absolutely true, because I can speak for myself and saying that once I found out that I had the language for it in ADOS and American Descendants of Slavery, it made it more difficult to ignore whatever contribution that I was going to make in the world. And so for me, it became, what do I do? I'm a mental health provider. So that's one of the things that we need. And Sharon, I know very similarly with you. We can talk about our own experiences in life in our personal lives, where, what I discovered ADOS and Breaking Brown and Tone Talks about maybe 2.5 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And it really was like a light bulb went off. And you can attest to this, because you remember when I started telling you about it all the time, and talking about it with any and everybody that would listen, and you become evangelical even about it. What's the evangelical? Somebody who goes out and is trying to tell everybody about the goodness of the word. And in this mm-hmm. case, the word is ADOS. And so, at this point, I don't know that I would consider myself evangelical, but it's tempered evangelism now. I've calmed down a little bit and realized that, I don't have to be so gung-ho about it, and I don't have to try to beat people over the head with it, because, I've had arguments in my personal life with people about ADOS and all of that. And, I'm realizing, in recent times that some of the way that they received or didn't receive that was because of the delivery. And when I say delivery, I mean my delivery. So, I've tempered that back some. And that's what we're saying to the ADOS family out there that's listening online and in the chat, that we get excited about get excited, but don't let that excitement overrule our capacity to continue to be mindful of the experience that our family and our friends.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm totally with you on all of that, Shamari. I know for me, when I started learning more about me, who I am as a Black woman, who I am as an American descendant of slavery, just started getting all this information. I felt like it was my duty to go back and tell about the goodness of this information, goodness of the word. But, when I do reflection, like, maybe the way I was going back, making a deliverance of this information to people who are not at the same levels as me may not have been great, So, learning about being patient and just having an understanding of where they are at in their, in their lives, and understanding that because of them, I am who I am as well. So it's all a work in progress, you guys. Just also, not only be patient with our family members, also be patient with ourselves, be kind too. I think that's something that we forget to do, or something that a lot of us don't know to do. It's very important for us to be kind and patient with ourselves too.
Yeah, absolutely right. Shall we get into number 4? Now, this is a big one. Oh, this is a big one. This is a big one, family. All right. So listen closely. Turn up your Bluetooth, turn up your volume so you can hear what we're about to say. Indulge in substances responsibly. And when we say substances, we're talking about whatever it is you choose to indulge in, whether that is alcohol, whether that is marijuana, or any of the range of things that lower people's inhibitions and allow us to think that some of the conversations and things that we want to say that should not be said are okay to be said at Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, right? So we get to drinking, and you get to smoking, and we get around our family, and then those inhibitions start to get lowered, and then we remember what Uncle so-and-so said or what cousin so-and-so did, and then all of a sudden you're in a moment where you're ranting and raving and screaming and cussing and hollering at each other about seemingly some topic that really means nothing, but you're really talking about other trauma and stuff that you got going on from years past. So recognize that you cannot control other people. You can only control yourself. So you can't go around trying to monitor what your cousins and your uncles and your aunties are drinking, but you can monitor what you are drinking. You can monitor and monitor how much of those things you are smoking and drinking, so that you can stay in control of your thoughts and feelings and behaviors, so that you're not out there wilding out on people at Thanksgiving and Christmas.
This point reminds me, I think, of the saying, loose lips sink ships. I believe.
You Sharona, I'm saying, I was thinking the same thing. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Whenever we get substances into our body, and we know this, you get real comfortable, you get real brave, you get real ready to just like let things rip.
Liquid courage.
Yes, liquid courage.
Mm-hmm.
You're exactly right. And so it is very important for us to be mindful that the consumption of substances can influence how we talk to people, and
Yep.
the things that it can influence the things that we want to bring up, like the traumas, the hurt, things that Shamari has already mentioned. You start remembering things, and you just ready to just let it rip. And also,
Mm-hmm.
if you are engaged into a difficult conversation as well, it could disrupt your emotional regulation, cause you to get frustrated too, and then
Mm-hmm.
that could lead to something else. So definitely
Yep.
try to be mindful of the amount of whiskey you may drink with your uncle,
Mm-hmm.
or
Watch that Hennessy.
yes, the Hennessy. I don't
Mhm.
even, you're right. That cognac or that Cavassier, I don't know if people still drink
Okay.
it. But just be mindful about how those things can influence you, because a lot of times after the consumption of these substances, that's when a lot of real conversations start to happen too. And that's sometimes when some things come out as well, whether it's like family traumas or family
Yep.
secret can be released during these conversations after
Mm-hmm.
the consumption of these substances. So like, definitely be mindful of the amount that you consume, and also be mindful of the amount that somebody else is consuming. And if this is a person who tends to be a toxic person in your life, or someone you don't feel comfortable with, whenever you see them consume a certain amount that you think will put you in an even more uncomfortable position, it's okay to remove yourself from that.
It's okay. Yeah,
It's,
that's one of the points that's coming up in a few minutes. Yeah, because then one of the things that we know, we've all seen that situation where everybody's sitting there having, drinking and laughing and eating and having a good time, and somebody over in the corner has had too much and they stewing, sitting there just getting mad, and then all of a sudden they blow up on everybody, and you don't know where it came from.
mm-hmm.
And that situation happens. So be mindful that that person is not you this
Yeah.
holiday season. Yeah.
Shantae brings up a good point in the chat. Find different coping techniques to aid you through your night and know your boundary level. Stay away from specific family members that trigger you.
Yep.
We're going to definitely be discussing that too. But yeah, you guys, it's very important.
Yeah.
You got to take care of
All
you.
right.
And I'm glad that's something that we all are learning as well, to learn to put ourselves first.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And self care, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But we're up to number five. And so number five is, and it kind of relates back to some of the earlier points about giving people information, is sow these seeds of information, knowing that the harvest might be delayed, and be
Mm-hmm.
patient with the process.
Yeah.
So, if you find those family members that are listening to what you're saying, but may not necessarily believe in it the way you do, or may not necessarily be invested as much as you are as of yet, know that they will come around. And sometimes it's just planting that seed so that, you can continue to water it a little bit every now and then. You don't have to try to drown the seed. What happens when you drown the seed? The seed is not going to flourish. It's not going to thrive. But, plant that seed, water it a little bit here and there, and then eventually it'll start to sprout up, and then it'll start to grow, and then you'll be able to reap that harvest. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Planting the seed sometimes may be the biggest impact that you can even have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like Shamari said, you got to be patient with the process. I mean, sometimes just planting the seed is just all you need to do. Sometimes, watering it may not even necessarily be as significant, or it may not even be necessary. Just planting the seed can be just enough. You've done your part. If this was something serious for you to relay, and just understand that it takes people time to come around to understanding new knowledge, or understanding something that they didn't want to know or want to understand, or even
Yeah.
trying to accept this information when they could believe something completely different before.
Mm-hmm.
you know so just give people time, because a lot of things about us, American descendants of slavery, our lives, our history. It's a lot. It really is. We have one hell of a history. We live one hell of a life on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of information about us, it could definitely be a lot to consume, or it could be a lot to just accept. The reality of the American descendant of slavery lives is just, whew.
Yeah, it just makes you want to take a deep breath sometimes.
Yes.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
That's what it makes you want.
It's a lot.
Like, we survived that, we lived that. This is what we're dealing with. Dang, we're still dealing with this today. Like, yeah, it is definitely a lot sometimes. Gosh.
Yeah, it can definitely be overwhelming. So, and speaking of surviving and still surviving, that takes us into point number 6, tip number 6, which is focus on the youth.
Yes.
Now, look, a very wise woman once saying, I believe the children are our future.
Mm-hmm.
Teach them well and let them lead the way. And then once you teach them and they start to lead the way, some of us need to get out the way. How about that part? Some of us need to step to the side once we have provided the information and we have reared them up and given them the wings that they need to fly. Some of us need to get out the way and let them do what they do and act as a support system. You remember the song "Wind Beneath My Wings"? Some of us don't know how to be the wind beneath the wings. We're too busy trying to be the wing. Yeah. Rona, that's on you.
Yes.
Look, I got having a moment that I felt like I was about to start preaching. I was trying to calm myself. See, this is what happens. These are the moments that happen. You got to make sure you're regulating your own energy so you're not overwhelming people. Go ahead, Sharon.
You're right. So, yeah, focusing on the youth. The youth are definitely our future, and the youth know way more than what we give them credit for. These younger generations, they're very impressive. They know a lot. They are receptive to a lot as well, and they're a bit more progressive than many people want to give them credit for. And sometimes our elders, they're stuck with where they are. There's nothing we can really do but plant that seed for them and just hope that they're gonna take it and it be water. But the youth, having real conversations with them and talking to them about the reality of being American descendant of slavery, having these tough conversations with them, I think that's where a lot of our focus should definitely be, so that we can break some of these, I guess people say generational curses, sorry. And they will definitely probably, do their own research and, talk to their other friends and just spread the word as well. That I think, for them, like these children be protesting, these children be ready to advocate. They just be knowing way more than what people want to give them, credit for. And I think we should definitely focus on providing the knowledge and the teachings to our youth, especially since they're not going to really get it in their education system. We know the education system is not going to teach them the truth and reality of things. Our elders have already had the opportunities that they probably could have. And so now I feel like we should definitely try to focus on our youth and open up, bring the sun and the moon into their lives on a lot of these difficult topics, the teachings, the things that they're not going to learn about themselves. For me, like I mentioned briefly earlier, I didn't start really learning, about being an American descendant of slavery until, more about me and who I am and my identity until recent years, and I'm an adult, I feel like I've been robbed because what I know now I wish I had known when I was younger. But now that we know what we know, just try to pass information on to our youth so that they won't miss out and won't be delayed as well.
Yeah.
And they're open-minded and willing to, they're still learning too. So like planting the seeds with them, and of course like helping them to water as well, providing them with the books that they can read and the articles and the films. I think it's important for us to, train up a child, because it's difficult to change an adult.
Sean, as you were talking, I'm thinking about, the differences in the generations. And one of the things that is coming to mind for me right now is that as we get older, our capacity to understand certain information and the necessity of certain change increases. But what happens is the youth are the ones that actually have the audacity to go out and make that change happen. Mm-hmm. So when you combine that capacity with that audacity, you can't stop us. And I think that that's part of where we have dropped the ball in some past generations, where we're not passing down that information that is going to inform the audacity of youth. And so that's where I think the ADOS movement is picking up the ball that has been dropped, and that we recognize the impetus is on us for there to be that transfer of information, so that these youth are out there armed with the information that we have, and knowing that we support them in their audaciousness and in their audacity. All right. So let's take a look at, we're up to number 7 now? Oh, this is a good one. Matter of fact, you want to go ahead and give the people this one?
So, point number 7, recognize that avoidance and separation from some family may be necessary or unavoidable. Mm-hmm. Let me repeat that one more time.
Please repeat that for the people.
Recognize that avoidance and separation from some family may be necessary or unavoidable. So, one thing I will say is that there's always been the mantra, that's your family, that's your brother, that's your sister, that's your cousin, that's your auntie, that's your family. And a lot of times, as we mentioned before, we are around people who may have traumatized us. They may make us uncomfortable. They may just be toxic. And one thing that one of my former teachers always told me, she was like, being around like-minded people. Sometimes you have to be around like-minded people. Sometimes it's difficult for people to be in a group of people who don't have the same perspectives or the thought process or beliefs as them. And when it comes to family, of course, you may be amongst people like that because we had different generations all coming together. And if there are some people who make you feel very uncomfortable because of a variety of reasons, it is okay to remove yourself from those spaces. It is okay to separate yourself from toxic people. You can love people from afar. You don't necessarily always have to be around someone just because they're family. Mm-hmm. What is the purpose? Like, you're doing yourself a disservice for sitting in such uncomfortness. And sometimes you're even re-traumatizing yourself too, depending on what the situation is. And so I think it's very important for us to know that sometimes we do have to separate ourselves or stay away or limit our presence with certain people, family members.
100%. Like we don't have to. It's just like the topic of this show. We will not suffer in silence. You don't have to continue to sit there and suffer in silence while you're sitting at the Thanksgiving dinner or the Christmas dinner table with your family members. And it is okay, like you already said, to remove yourself. And matter of fact, one of the things I would say is that understand when you are being triggered. How do you understand? How do you know when you are being triggered? When your heart starts racing fast, when you start to sweat, when you start to feel yourself getting angry, you might start to get hot. You might start to feel like there's certain things that you want to say that maybe you feel uncomfortable saying. Those are all indicators. Your body is letting you know that you are being triggered, that something is happening for you. And it is okay to then do some of the things that we've talked about, which is, remove yourself from the situation. Maybe, don't indulge in substances as much. And like Sharona mentioned earlier, and that's going to be our final topic for number 10 is going to be breathe. We'll get to that in a moment. But know that, recognize that in yourself. Sharona, I see you want to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I literally read a meme earlier today or a tweet. I don't know. It was one of those things that your body will reject. It will give you anxiety, vibes, or increased heart rate whenever you're around someone that it does not want to be around. And so it's important to listen to your body.
Yeah. I want to just give shout out to Taj Marie and about the generations and the ancestors and the youth. Taj Marie says the past has been crafted by the elder and the future is for the youth, but the present is for everyone. In other words, all voices should be heard in the present. You know what? I like that. Taj, I might steal that from you. I like that. That's the word. Go ahead.
I do. I like it as well. Whenever I saw it, and I meant to mention it, but yeah, I like that word as well. I'm just visualizing a living room with the elder, millennial generation experts, and so we're all we're having a discussion together, and we're all trying to understand where each of us is coming from, and we're all teaching and learning from each other. That's what I visualized when I read what Taj Marie said. All of our voices should be heard in the present. Because without our elders, we wouldn't be where we are today as well. And then we got the youth that we have to mold as well for our futures. And then we still have a ways to go as well. We're still learning and growing too. So like I think all of us should be a part of the conversations. Just also, of course, being patient and having an understanding of how things may be accepted and how things may not be as well.
Yeah.
But yes.
And
go ahead, Siobhan.
Oh, yeah. This is related to tip number 8. Practice self-care and guard your spirit. Look, it is okay to tell your family when you are uncomfortable or you have reached your capacity for tolerance with a specific topic. You can kindly let your family know, you know what? Hey, I'm not really feeling this right now, or, I'm a little uncomfortable with the way this conversation is headed. And so if it's all right with you all, I'm just going to pull myself. I'm going to withdraw from this. Look, no judgment, none of that. I'm going to keep right.
Like I'm feeling triggered right now.
Yeah, and it's okay. It's okay to recognize that you have been triggered, and it's okay to let people know that I don't want you all to take this any kind of way, but I recognize that this is a difficult conversation for me. I recognize that this has the potential to go in a direction that I don't want it to go in. So I'm just going to continue to sip my libation and eat my turkey and my mac and cheese, like Sharona just said, and enjoy myself so that everybody can continue to enjoy themselves, right? And it's okay to prioritize yourself. You don't have to suffer the best interest of the family. Yes. We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that no more, you guys. I'm so glad that we're all learning about self-care and taking care of ourselves and putting ourselves first. I think another thing too, when it comes to practicing self-care, especially when we're gathering with family or friends as well, is prepare yourself. I think that's important too. Like, understand what you may be going into, and take deep breaths. Foresee what the conversation may be like and how you may handle it or regulate it. Pay attention to your body. Take deep breaths. Deep breaths.
Oh, that's back.
Yeah. You'll be amazed at how taking deep breaths can really calm you and really slow your body down. And just just mentally prepare yourself as well. And if you find out during your preparations for a particular gathering is not going to be great for you, then it's okay to cancel. It really is. It's
Yeah.
not a
Mm-hmm.
you're doing this for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times we feel guilty about like telling someone no or counseling, trying to get ourselves out of something that we don't really want to be in. But if your body, your gut is telling you no, then you should tell them no too.
Yeah.
And just put yourself in another place where you're going to be okay, and feel comfortable. But you guys, we got to stop putting ourselves first, and we definitely need to practice self-care, and it is okay to say no.
Yeah. And that ties right in. That's a perfect segue into tip number 9, which is don't feel obligated to engage family who are emotionally abusive or make you uncomfortable. So all of what we just got through talking about, there are some family members that you just probably should not be engaging with because
Yeah.
they can't handle it and you can't handle it, and that is okay.
Mhm.
In many instances, there are different rooms in the house that you can be in. Sometimes you don't have to go. Sometimes you might go and spend a certain amount of time and then leave after a certain amount of time. Like if you know that there's that one uncle that every Thanksgiving around about the 9 o'clock hour when that henny got to flowing and they went out to the car and did a little smoky smoke and did everything and they feeling themselves now it's 9 o'clock and then they get a little wild and start to create a ruckus. It's okay for you to leave at 8:45. That is okay if you know that that is a thing that happens. And it's just like Sharona said a few minutes ago. You know, we understand our family dynamics. We know who we are and we know how we show up in the family and we know how other people show up in the family. And we do not have to continue to tolerate bad behavior from people that we love just because we love them. Sometimes, sometimes loving somebody means taking your butt home, removing yourself out of that situation. Sometimes loving me might mean me putting myself first and prioritizing myself. Right, Sharon?
Right, you're absolutely right. For some reason, as soon as you mentioned this point, it reminded me of the meme where it was like, "Black people, you've gained weight is not a greeting." Because I know in American family and our families, sometimes the introduction is emotionally abusive. It really
Yes,
is. We will
yes,
start greeting off with being
yep,
shady. And that
yep,
set the mood
yep.
and the tone for somebody for the duration of the gathering. And
Mhm,
that's literally
mhm,
what I thought about. So, like, that's why it's so important, you guys, to protect yourselves, practice self care, put yourself first, protect your spirit.
mhm, mhm. And look, so did you gain weight is not a greeting that you ain't married yet or where your girlfriend, all this stuff that we like to say to people. Stop saying that to people. Stop doing that to
Yeah.
people. That ain't none of your business. Regardless of whether
But
you feel like they have gained weight or not, it ain't your place to say it.
yes, but also understand that a lot of these emotional abusive statements that family members tend to give is also maybe coming from a traumatic place for them as well, or insecure place as well. So that's another point I think is also important to remember. I'm not saying what they're saying is okay because they may be dealing with something or going through some things. I think it's important to have that type of understanding about our family members and what they may be going through or dealing with in silence and why they may be behaving the way they're behaving. And
Mm-hmm.
also that you can remove yourself from that person too.
Yeah.
And you don't
And
have
and that goes back to post traumatic slave syndrome and how we've been taught to deal with one another and we've been taught to interact with one another negatively. And sometimes we feel like playing the dozens and saying all these things that on the surface are hurtful are okay, but it's really just the way we've been taught to socialize with one another. And it's okay to choose new ways of relating to one another, particularly if you know that you're talking to or speaking with somebody who doesn't respond well to that. Like it's called emotional intelligence. Like you know that there are certain family members that you can joke with like that, and they're okay with it. And even sometimes with those, sometimes people are hiding the fact that they are not okay with it. So let's just be mindful and be respectful of let's try to lead with kindness particularly during the holiday season this year, because we got this COVID-19 pandemic going on, so a lot of people may or may not actually even be able to convene and commune with their family members, or they may be doing it in different ways through Zoom and Skype and all the different video chat features. And so, if we find ourselves in a situation where maybe we're not communing with our family in person, but we're communing with them via Skype and some of these other video chat platforms, the same rules still apply, and recognize that particularly this year, with just coming off the heels of this election and with COVID-19, that people are especially sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Emotions are raw, and so you might see friends and family who are behaving and acting in ways that seem out of the norm for them, and try to tap into your capacity for empathy. If you understand that we all got a lot on our plate right now, then let that be the thing that helps to build empathy within you, so that you don't necessarily feel like you have to lash out or retaliate in the ways in which you have been met with something that is hurtful or offensive.
Yes. Pay attention to our bodies, and also be mindful of like how you may engage because of what you're dealing with as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes it may not necessarily be just family, it could be us, ourselves, what we be bringing into.
You know what? Yeah. Matter of fact, say that again. I think it's somebody out there in the back that needs to hear that. It ain't always them. Go ahead, Shavonda.
Yeah, it's not always sometimes the family, sometimes it's us. We need to be mindful of ourselves and what we're maybe currently going through or dealing with in that moment that we may bring into that space. So if you pay attention to your body, pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to like how you're feeling and what you're worrying about, because that sometimes can show up in these gatherings as well, show up in these spaces, especially when we know we're about to be around a particular person or particular people. It's important for us to pay attention to that so that we don't come in and disrupt the good vibes and the good energy. So definitely like be mindful how you may show up.
Yeah, because you might be the problem, and here you are thinking that it's everybody else, and it's you. Okay, so we can't go in throwing stones in glass houses. We all heard that before, right? And you know what, Sharon? I want you to do the final one, number 10, because you touched on that a couple of times, and I feel like that one might be close to your spirit. The breathing.
Yes. The final and 10th point, you guys, is to just breathe. This has been one heck of a year for many of us. And just being an American descendant of slavery, we just live a hell of a life, in general. Like in comparison to other people, like our lives is just sometimes I'm just really amazed at how we just keep going, because we're constantly enduring, struggling. We've also overcome a lot of fights as well and had a lot of triumph, but we still deal with a lot. And so I think it's very important that we breathe. Like Blackout says in the chat, being Black in America is traumatic in itself. And we're constantly dealing with racism and all sorts of different traumatic things on a daily basis. And so I think it's important for us to just breathe. Breathe on a daily basis, breathe, take deep breaths before you're about to engage in a family gathering or a gathering any kind, because, sometimes gatherings, we have a variety of people with different perspectives, different thoughts on different things, and that could be, triggering within itself. But, sometimes just take a moment to just breathe for yourself, do that for you, to, slow your body down, slow your thoughts down, and just like a moment to just take care of yourself. I think deep breathing as simple as it may be, it could definitely go a long way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And practicing some mindfulness to just get in touch with how you are feeling in that moment. And if you recognize that, maybe you are triggered or your anxiety is heightened or maybe your emotions are heightened, that taking a moment to sit with yourself and find stillness within yourself can help bring you back to a place of calm so that you don't necessarily feel like you have to be reactionary and you can move with intention as opposed to just reacting to what is going on around you. So, yeah, that's a good one. So, what I would like to do at this point, we are at the 1 hour mark. So, we are going to begin to wrap up. But if there are questions that people have in the chat, you can put those in there now and we'll try to address a couple of those questions. But if not, then we will go ahead and begin to wrap up and sign off for the evening. I'm looking at the chat here. Go ahead. You say what's wrong?
Have the benediction.
Right. So I'm looking here. Let's see. American Lady is saying had the topic of epigenetics and the inherited family trauma of slavery and Jim Crow as it relates specifically to ADOS been discussed. So we talked about that a little bit 2 weeks ago in the first session that we had of lineage therapy, and that's something that's going to come up in future sessions. So thank you for reiterating that need or that topic. We have a need for that topic. And so continue to be on the lookout. We're going to do these sessions either via a live stream or via Zoom every 2 weeks. And so if you are not already on the mailing list, you can sign up for the mailing list at we will not suffer in silence.org, or you can go to adoslT.org. And ADOSLT is ADOS Lineage Therapy, but it's the acronym adoslT.org is where you will go to sign up to be on the mailing list. All right, let's see. What else we got here?
Oh, I love what you just said. I'm sorry, Shamari.
Go.
What Shantae is saying is so true. American Descendants of Slavery, we have lived a remarkable existence. We adapted and evolved. Growing takes patience and time while understanding who you are and that you have the power to change the temperature around you. Shantae, thank you so much for that, because that is a finger snap.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Shantae. And then this is Brusco. Is that Brusco? What is it, Brucey? What are some ways to convince our family to join ADOS lineage therapy if it exists near us? Well, I think it's kind of going back to some of the things we talked about earlier, where you can begin to plant that seed and just continue to water that seed periodically and wait for it to bloom. Because you don't want to bombard people with information because then they become resistant to it. But plant that seed, talk to them, let them come to you, because we've heard so many times on the Breaking Brown call-in show where family members or callers have called in and they've talked about how they planted these seeds months ago, years ago, and then it takes for that family member or that friend to have an experience in their real life that is connected to the data and connected to the information to begin to make that shift and make that connection for themselves. And then, they become just like the rest of us. They're all in. But what we don't want to do is beat people over the head with information, because that's just going to breed resistance. And that's not what we want.
Yeah. Little by little.
And then we have Sadiku is saying this is the new format, no more Zoom. No, we're going to do both. So sometimes we're going to have the live stream and sometimes we're going to have the Zoom sessions, but we will keep you all posted via the newsletter and the emails and also on Twitter. But these sessions will happen every 2 weeks. All right. So Sharona, you got a final word for the people before we get out of here?
The final word for the people is, you guys, just remember, the points that we all delivered to you all. Try your best to, reenact the things that we have discussed with you all. We don't expect no one to be perfect and to just be able to just do all of these things all at once. Most importantly, we want you to remember to put yourself first. Be patient. Be patient, and to please just practice self-care and to breathe. Um, Understanding that we, as American descendants of slavery, we've been through a lot. We're still going through a lot, and we all just need to be kind with ourselves and try to practice kindness as well with our families. Um, Nothing is too serious for us to lose a family member's relationship, if at possible, unless it's something completely traumatic. But other than that, I love you all. Thank you for having us tonight. Thank you for joining in on this show. And let's not suffer in silence. Let's stop that.
Very well said. I'll let that be the last word. Thank you all, and have a beautiful rest of the evening and happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Yes, happy Indigenous Peoples holiday, um, because they were the root of, of a traumatic situation that led to this day. Have a wonderful week.